Hello, let's talk about romance tropes I love. If you watched my last video, it was all about romance tropes I hate, and I had 5 I disliked. I will have it in the comments. If I can figure out how to put it up here by then, I will. But today we're going to talk about romance tropes that I love instead, because love is romance. So we also have 10 today instead of 5, and I have examples. I did not give examples of romance books I hate because why would I do that? I'm not a mean person. So let's start with, I have my laptop right here, so I do them in correct order. Number 10 is accidental pregnancy. So if you watched my tropes I hate, I don't like secret baby, but I do like accidental pregnancy. I think it's fun to watch 2 characters who are not planning on having a baby get thrown into parenthood. I find it very interesting and fun. And since I personally have never had a super accidental pregnancy, it's fun for me. I did have twins though, which was a surprise, which I don't call an accident, just a surprise. My example for this book, for this trope, is The Son of the Shadows, which is an odd example because it is a historical fantasy, but this is my favorite book of all time, so it had to go on this list. In this story, we also have a kidnapping, which is not usually my cup of tea, but I like it in this one. We have Leodin, who is a daughter in a relatively powerful family in medieval Ireland. She is a healer, and she gets kidnapped by a band of traveling warriors. And would you believe that the leader of this band of traveling warriors is an extremely attractive man who's got half of his entire body is covered in tattoos? Would you believe it? Would you believe that he becomes her baby daddy? Yes, you would. It's not a super surprise pregnancy because it is historical fantasy. So she's not like, oh my God, how did I get pregnant? There was a condom and I'm on the pill. She understands like the risks she's taking. This is a great book. If you like historical fantasy, you should read everything that Juliette, it's either Marillier or Marillier, has ever written. She's my favorite author of all time. She's fantastic. Read this book. Number 9, my favorite is Angst. I like me some tortured characters. What can I say? I like when they really got to be put through the ringer. I like it in contemporary. I like it in historical. I like it in paranormal. I like it in fantasy. I like it in all my subgenres. So my example for this one is All Scot and Bothered by Kerrigan Byrne, which I don't have a copy of. I read on my Kindle. There's the cover. This is a historical, and I did think it was kind of odd because the title, All Scot and Bothered, sounds like it's going to be kind of a funny historical. It is not. This entire series by Kerrigan Byrne is pretty dark and comes with some heavy trigger warnings. This book, the trigger warnings, I would say, are off-page assault of both sexual and physical nature, and there is some child abuse off-page, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure there is. I've read all the books in this series, and I'm kind of confusing this one and the last one, whether or not the child abuse is in both. I think it's in both. So in this book, the premise is a little bit of a different setup for her historical fiction. We have Cecilia, our heroine, and the book starts way in the past where she is an orphan, and then suddenly she has this mysterious benefactor who sends her to a really prestigious boarding school. She becomes friends with all these influential families, and her life is sort of turned around, but she never knows who her benefactor is. Then we fast forward to she's a young adult. She's in her 20s. I want to say more like mid to late 20s. She's not that young. And she inherits a gaming hall, and she has to take on the persona of the Scarlet Lady, who's this powerful woman who runs a gaming hall in Regency London. Our hero, Ramsey, is such a stick in the mud when it starts. I was going to use a different word, but I am trying not to swear on this channel very much. He has the job of like basically cleaning up the city, shutting down the gaming halls, shutting down the prostitution, shutting down the brothels. And he is super religious, and they meet. Obviously, they're not going to have a super easy time getting together if she runs a gaming hall and it's his job to shut them down. I was so surprised how much I liked this book because when this started, I thought Ramsey was a jerk and I never thought I'd come around to him. But Kerrigan Byrne, she's a very good writer and she made me come around to him. So if you want an angsty historical, All Scot and Bothered is the way to go. So number 8, we have childhood friends. And I actually have a few books on this list that are childhood friends, but this was the one I wanted to use as an example. I love a good story of we were good friends when we were under 10, so there was no romance involved. Then I love a good story of like teenagers who were in love and then get back together in their like late 20s or 30s. The book I'm using for an example is the Heiress Hunt. I was gonna say the Heiress Hunt. Oh my gosh, the Heiress Hunt by Joanna Shupe. I've also really gotten into Joanna Shupe this year. She writes Gilded Age, so it's like the early 1900s in America, New York, like everything's glamorous and everybody's wealthy and like the Great Depression hasn't hit yet. So in the Heiress Hunt, we've got Harrison Archer who needs to get married, and he needs to marry an heiress. And his best friend is Maddie, what is her last name? Maddie Webster. She is currently engaged to a duke. She's also like an amazing tennis player, which was a really cool part of this book because you get to learn a lot about women's tennis at that time period. So he decides that Maddie would be a great person to find him the perfect wife. So Maddie decides to throw this like week-long party where Harrison's gonna come and she invites all the eligible heiresses so she can find him the perfect wife. Who do you think he falls in love with? Who do you think it is? I think you know. I think you know who it is. It's a great book. It's super fun. I've been reading this whole series. I've read the first two, loved them. I can't wait for the next one. Okay, so trope number 7, I don't have an example for because there's only one bed, and that's in like 50% of romance novels. So basically, if you open a romance novel, there's a really good chance that there'll be a time when there's only one bed and they have to decide whether they're gonna share or whether or not the hero is gonna sleep on the floor. I have a good personal story. I was backpacking in Europe when I was 20 years old, and one of my best friends from high school, who was a man, I mean, at that point he was a boy, but he's a man now, came to travel with me for a little bit. And we had set up different hostels all over. We did like Germany, Switzerland, and Italy. And when we got to our hostel in Switzerland, it was a weird hostel. First of all, it was rock and roll themed. So we had the REM room, and we were expecting like it to be a room with bunk beds in it, and there were multiple people, and it had one full-size bed in it. And he was like, we can share a bed. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. And I slept on the floor. I was already dating my husband, who I'm obviously very much in love with, and had no romantic inclinations to this friend who was jet lagged. So I let him have the bed rather than him take the floor. That was a weird hostel. If you're ever in Zurich, I don't know if it's still open. This was in like 2004. The Rock and Roll Hostel, I think is what the Zigzag Rock and Roll Hostel. Check it out. It was strange. Okay, so trope number 6 that I love is fake relationship. Oh, love it. So the most famous one right now is The Duke and I, because we all watched Bridgerton. I mean, I've read the series too, but most people have watched Bridgerton, so you see they decide to form a fake attachment and then they fall in love. My favorite romance novel of all time, I think, there's like 2, and they're both on this list, they're probably tied, is The Duchess Deal by Tessa, and that's got a great fake relationship. So we open the Duke of Ashbury. He is one of my favorite heroes of all time. He is a war hero who has come back with some very severe scarring from a war injury. His engagement falls apart. He doesn't know what he's gonna do. He needs to get married. He needs an heir. He's sitting in his office, kind of contemplating this, when a woman walks into his office wearing a wedding dress. She is the seamstress who created the wedding dress for his intended and says, you need to pay me for this. I worked really hard on this and I had all the materials and you have to pay me for this dress. So her name is Emma Gladstone. And instead of just getting payment, he instead says, why don't you marry me? But we're gonna have these rules, and here are the rules. We are only husband and wife at night. I don't want a relationship with you. I want one male heir. That's it. No other kids. We're just gonna knock you up with a man and then you're gone. No kissing, no lights on. And Emma hems and haws, and she's really in a hard place in her life where she doesn't have any money, and so she decides to do it. This story is such a beautiful love story. It's really funny, but it's also super touching. It's one of the few romances I've read more than once. I love this whole series. There's 3 books out right now, and 1 is coming out, I believe, in 2022. I will buy it the second it comes out and read it. It is so good. The Duchess Deal by Tessa. Okay, so our next trope is arranged marriage, which kind of goes with fake relationship as well if you're looking at historicals. But for this, I want to talk about an entire series. It's called The Brides of Paradise Ranch, and it's by Mary Farmer. These are all novellas, and I burned through this series so fast. So the premise of the whole series is that there's this big ranch in this new town in Wyoming, and a ton of men work on it. And the man that runs the ranch decides that they need to settle this town down. So he builds houses, but you can only move into the house if you have a wife. So all these young men decide to order brides. It's such a cute series. It's like, if you like pioneer romance, but like minus the strife and so hot. I feel like a lot of pioneer romances are sweet. When I first started trying to get into pioneer romance, they were way too sweet for me. There was like maybe a peck, and no thank you. That is not the kind of romance that I read. So check out Brides of Paradise Ranch. My favorite one is number 2, and I can't even think of what it's called right now. It's like his, she's so sassy. Eden's the heroine in that one. She's so sassy. They're all like his bewildering bride, his beautiful bride. They're all his blank bride. They're super fun. Check them out. You'll read the whole series in like 3 weeks. All right, my 4th favorite trope is soulmates. I love a good soulmate story. I'm a hopeless romantic. I think soulmates are so fun. I love them when they have to do with another trope that we're going to talk about a little bit further down, like vampires and werewolves and all that business. I love it. So the one that I picked is a paranormal, and it would also work for the next trope. It's called Touch the Sky by Carrie Cole. Again, this is a romance I've read more than once, which is odd for me. In this story, we have Vaughn Ellis, who's a rare double shifter. So he's never really felt like he belonged in either of his clans. He's a wolf shifter, but he's also an eagle shifter. And he's always been kind of on the outskirts of both. He's the sheriff, of course, because we have to read some romances in which the sheriff is the hero. Then we meet Hannah, and Hannah is on the run. She is also sort of like a split soul. She's both wolf shifter and witch, and something very horrible has happened to her family, and she's in hiding. So she comes to this small town. I believe they're in Montana. Yeah, Montana or Idaho, and meets Vaughn. Now, immediately there's so much attraction, and obviously they just can't get over how good the other one smells, which is a big thing for soulmates and for werewolves. And she is keeping him at arm's length because she's worried that her past is going to catch up with her. And she's not as much worried for herself, but now she's worried for Vaughn because she has all these feelings about him. Such a great paranormal romance. Read it, enjoy it, love it. Okay, so my 3rd favorite trope is monsters. So we're talking werewolves, we're talking bear shifters, we're talking vampires, we're talking now, like, you can find orcs, you can find basically anything you're into. I like a good monster romance. I do. I mean, I think it stems from me being a teenager and being obsessed with Angel on Buffy and on Angel. He was so handsome. Love me some David Boreanaz. My example is a book that I just read, just finished, and I'm obsessed with, and it's Wolf Gone Wild by Juliet Cross. I will most likely do a whole video review of this book because I loved it so much. So in this, we have a werewolf who can't shift. There's a hex on him. His name's Mateo. His wolf's name is Alpha, and he will not shut up. He is in his head all day long, driving him crazy. And then we have Evie, who's a witch and a very good hex breaker. So they hook up, and it's lovely. Hilarious, fun, great plot. Evie has a bunch of sisters. It's going to be a whole series. I literally finished this and ordered the sequel immediately, which is sitting on my shelf, but I'm waiting to read it until I read a couple more things that are on my TBR this month, even though all I want to do is read that book because this one was so fantastic. If you love yourself some monster romance, Wolf Gone Wild. Okay, my 2nd favorite trope is friends to lovers. A lot of people aren't into friends to lovers. I love friends to lovers because I really love reading a book where the author can kill the friendship chemistry and then also kill the lovers chemistry. I think it's fantastic. I think it's fun to read a book where the hero and heroine are already comfortable with each other and they already know all their deepest, darkest secrets. So there's also, I feel like, a lot less angst in those stories, even though I do love me some angst. but I just love it. I love reading a Friends to Lovers. So my example of a Friends to Lovers is Dr. Strangebeard by Penny Reid. It is in the Winston Brothers series, which is a fantastic, this is my favorite contemporary series. It's number 5, I wanna say. I'm not 100% certain. It's in the second half of the series. This follows Roscoe Winston, who's the youngest of the Winston brothers, and he's a very handsome veterinarian. And Simone, what's Simone's last name? Simone's last name is Peyton, and Simone Peyton, they were best friends in high school, and Roscoe was in love with her, but she didn't know. And then one night when they're drunk, he tells her and she reacts really poorly, and he sort of cuts off their friendship. So fast forward 10 years, they're both in their 20s now. Simone's been living out of state. She comes back, now they're suddenly around each other again, and they decide to give their friendship a go. Do you think something else might happen now that they're both in their 20s and mature and can handle a relationship with such intense feelings, with such a great friendship as the basis? What do you think? What do you think? Yeah, I mean, obviously they're gonna fall in love. My number 1 romance trope, which isn't a super popular one for people to love more than anything, and I don't know why, but it's pining. I love to read a book with a good pine. I love to read a book with one character pining. I love to read a book with both characters pining, where they just cannot get it together to tell their significant, well, their hopeful significant other that they love them. And they just stew in their emotions for months to years. Fantastic. I love tortured characters. I can't help it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So my example is my tied number 1 romance book of all time, and it's Seduce Me at Sunrise by Lisa Kleypas. If you're a Lisa Kleypas fan, you know there's a lot of St. Vincent versus Derek Craven, and I say neither. They're fine. Kev Maripin is where it's at. I want a hero who, he's sort of a Heathcliff, but there's a happy ending. So he has been in love with Wynne Hathaway since they were teenagers, and her family took him in. He was left for dead, and they basically nursed him back to health, took him in, and he became like a ward. But they loved him, so more, not as much as like a ward as like another child. He disappears for years because he can't be around Wynne. He's not good enough for her. He loves her, but he knows he's not good enough for her. Then he comes back, and Wynne's like, I'm into it. I'm into you. I want to be with you. But he still doesn't feel good enough. And there's some weird stuff about his past that he feels uncomfortable about. This has such a good seduction scene in it. Read this book, even if you're not a pining person, even if you're not a historical person. Read this book for the seduction scene. There's a reason it's called Seduce Me at Sunrise. It's fantastic. It's one of those where you'll just be like, wow, Lisa Kleypas, you are a goddess among us. You are such a good author. And those are my top 10 tropes. Did I hit any of your tropes? Do you love the tropes that I hate? Do you hate the tropes that I love? Let me know. If you like this video, like and subscribe, please. And I will see you soon.